I want to thank Joseph. I want to thank Joel Rosenberg and all of Israel, all Arab News for truly your wonderful partnership. We are absolutely thrilled to provide this special tour, the special Pentecost Shavuot tour to Mount Zion in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. My name is Elisa Moed, and I am the CEO of Travelujah. We are an Israel-based travel company, and as I mentioned, we're located in the Galilee. I am originally from Michigan, so that's why I have such a heavy Israeli accent. And I lived with my children, my husband, my 4 children, about 16 years ago, and we're still here. In fact, I do have one child right now, my youngest, who is a commander on the Lebanese border and has been very active these last few days, as you can well imagine. And my company, Travelujah, is an expert source in Holy Land travel. We've got about 1,000 pages of content on our site, and we basically provide tours, curate tours that allow people the opportunity to journey deeper. And we have some fabulous guides, one of which is Itamar Ben David, who is my partner on all these virtual tours, and you'll meet him in just a minute. We work with ministries and churches and Bible study groups and synagogues and federations and many families on tours. But as Joseph mentioned, for the last 16 months, unfortunately, we've not been able to do any tours, any real tours. What we have been doing is really keeping people connected by offering special virtual programs. And we're just so thrilled that you're here today to experience one. I know that you're all likely very concerned about the situation here and the hostilities. And it's concerning, obviously, to all of us because of the danger it presents. And we're also very concerned about the images that we're seeing abroad about that are showing how, I guess, basically attacking us for our
defending yourself.
We're defending ourselves, and Israel is our home, and it's the only democracy in the Middle East, and we just want to keep it safe for all people that live here. So I just want to thank you all for your support in that as well. Tonight's program is going to focus on Mount Zion, which takes a very front and center role in Pentecost and also for the Jewish people as well. And it is being celebrated in a few days. It's interesting as well because at the time that the state of Israel was established in 1948, the first 19 years of the life of the state of Israel, from 48 to 67, it was actually the closest place that Jews could come to pray towards the Temple Mount. And Itamar will go into that in just a minute. But so it's a very significant site for many reasons, and there's a lot to see. And the last thing I do want to tell you before we move on, and we can talk about this a little bit towards the end, is that if everything goes well, May 23rd has been targeted as the date where the Ministry of Tourism and the Ministry of Health is going to begin to allow some pilot groups into the country. About 25 to 30 pilot groups will be allowed into Israel. And if that goes well, then individual tourists should be allowed into the country beginning in July 1st. At this point, obviously everybody has to have a COVID test and has to have has to have been vaccinated and also has to have had a COVID test before they arrive. And there may be additional restrictions or regulations, but at this point, those are the major regulations. Until there is some sort of reciprocity agreement, they're also asking people to have a serology test as well upon arrival. That may very well become a moot point because we do expect that within the foreseeable future that test will be eliminated. But we're very happy with the fact that the ministry has okayed tourism, which will hopefully start, assuming the current state of hostilities will be soon completed or come to some sort of a resolution in the next few days. It is supposed to start next week. So we'll see, we'll keep you posted. I'm sure Joel and Joseph and the team over at All Israel News will certainly be publishing that as soon as it becomes a reality. So anyway, again, I want to thank you all, and I want to introduce you to Itamar Ben David, one of the best guides here in Israel. He's based in Jerusalem, and he's going to be taking you now on a tour Travelujah tour to Mount Zion.
Hello, and thank you very much, Lisa and Joseph. Thank you all for participating and joining us. And my name is Itamar, and I live in Jerusalem, and we are going through the journey of the Pentecost, story of the Pentecost that is coming up in just. I have some noise, and if you guys can mute, that would be terrific. So anyway, guys, the Pentecost, Shavuot, the 7 weeks between the Exodus, this is Egypt, Exodus from Egypt in the Old Testament, all the way 7 weeks walk to the bottom of Mount Sinai. This is the Old Testament Pentecost. 7 weeks, 49 days in which the Israelites, the tribes of Israel, took off the burden of slavery and sin during these 7 weeks. Of course, this is a very symbolic number 7, and 7 times 7 makes it very, very special. Then the 50th day is a day that I would say is supernatural day. It's out of the time, not part of the time as we know it. It's out of the time, just like the 8th day, it's a special day. And when you read through the Old Testament, focusing for a moment on the Old Testament, you realize there are 71 days of holiday. 71 days of holiday, 52 Saturdays, 52 Shabbat, plus the 19 days, and the additional one is actually in autumn time. That's the last day of Sukkot. And what you learn from it is there is something that is above time and above nature in the 50th day or the 71st or the 8th day. And this is what we are trying to see today. On the 50th day, the day of Pentecost, after 7 weeks, the children of Israel get the commandments, the 10 commandments of the Torah. The 10 commandments, I would call it the constitution of Israel. And we'll get a little deeper into that towards the end of the session. But it has deep connection, of course, to the Christian Pentecost, and we will see that as we walk through in Mount Zion. So with that, I want to take you, with the help of Google Earth, I want to take you now to Israel. So I think I've seen on the chat people from different parts, which is great. But right now we are in the Middle East. You can see the Middle East right in front of you. And we're just flying over Israel for a moment. Here we are, zooming in. And for those of you who haven't been to Israel before, this is the Mediterranean, the eastern side of the Mediterranean. The Hermon Mountain is the very far northern end of the country, the Hermon Mountain. You can see the Sea of Galilee just over here, the Dead Sea just over here, and the Red Sea is just over here in Eilat. About, let's say, 8 hours drive from north to south, from top to bottom, and about an hour and a half from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River, which starts at the slopes of Hermon Mountain to the Sea of Galilee and ultimately ends up at the Dead Sea. So very small country, as you probably know. Right now, I want to take you to Jerusalem, which is in the heart of the country, right over here. And just like Elisa mentioned earlier, Mount Zion for the Israelis in modern time, in the 20th century, was the place to pray, with lack of other closer places to pray. So what I'm going to highlight now is the green line that you can see right over here. And in the city itself, it really goes through the city itself, and it leaves the old city area outside the green line in the Jordanian territory, again, back in 48. What we don't really see here is that Mount Zion was also a part of Israel. There was a military base on Mount Zion, and we'll see some remains of these ancient, these old days, not ancient, but old days So let's get a little closer to Mount Zion. And right now I want to highlight the Ottoman walls of the old city, which are over here. And although historically speaking, Mount Zion was always a part of the old city until about 800 years ago, it was always a part of the old city. These are, again, the boundaries of the old city today, the Ottoman walls, which are 500 years old. But Mount Zion is outside, it's over here. Just like another important part of Jerusalem, the city of David, is outside the walls. The ancient part of Jerusalem is actually outside of the, let's say, not call it modern, but the Ottoman wall today. Another important part is Mount of Olives, which was always which was always outside the old city. But these two circles that you see, City of David and Mount Zion, historically, until the last 800 years, it was always a part of the old city. Okay, so let's get a little closer. And I'm taking you now to the Dormition Abbey. You can see it right over here. It's such a beautiful little place over here. Every time I take either Israelis or foreign travelers, they always go around this corner and then they see this little alleyway with the Church of Dormition behind it, and there's some other religious institutions over here. They always just marvel the beauty of it, especially when it's afternoon, around 4 or 5 p.m. There's this golden light on the limestone, which makes the stones become a little golden, just absolutely beautiful. And what I want to share with you now is a little walk in the Dormition Abbey. I don't know, I hope you'll be impressed. And with that, we are going to walk up to the room of the Last Supper. So this is a little walk in the Dormition Abbey. There's some Franciscan monastery over there. You can see around the corner, you can see the Dormition Church and a Jewish family walking over there. Usually when they walk there, it's to, I'll skip that, it's to the tomb of King David, which we will see. We will see that. So this is a little walk. You can see it was the afternoon, so you can see the light. The church itself in front of us, it's a German Catholic church, the Dormition Abbey, and the tradition over there is that Mary fell into eternal sleep, basically where she passed away over there. So right now, let's move on a little more in this little alleyway. And I want to show you the entrance to the upper room, to the room of the Last Supper. Here, again, the church. And this is the entrance to the room of the Last Supper. There is some Ottoman inscription on the very top, because again, a lot of the complex over there was built under the Mamluks or the Ottomans, most of what you see, let's say in the last 600 or 700 years. So as we know, the room of the Last Supper is also known as the upper room. Okay, the upper room, so we have to climb up a little bit. And originally it was an attic of some random Jewish person that Jesus and the disciples, they rented this space for just before Passover. So let's enter. This is the entryway. And right over here, there's a little story I want to share with you. Okay. Here we are. Just a second. Let's give it another try. Okay, great. So right over here, there is a microwave that you can see right here. And one time I was there with a nice evangelical family from I think it's from Virginia, if I remember correctly. They had, I think, 7 or 8 kids, and one of the youngest kids was asking, "Wow, they had microwave in the room of the Last Supper?" So I always love telling that story of how children, make things a little more reasonable for them. So this is the entryway, just the entryway. We'll skip that. And I want to move on to the next room, which is the room of the Last Supper. With that, I'll stop this video. And I want to take you, as I said, to the room of the Last Supper itself. Here we are, the room of the Last Supper. And I'll say a few words about the history of the place, but as you can see, it's not the original little attic that used to be there in the days of Jesus. These arches are from the days of the Crusaders. And what is the story over there? So there are quite a few important stories and traditions on the mountain in Mount Zion, and of course in the room of the Last Supper. The most important one is the Mass. The Mass and the Lord's Supper. And when you visit it, you will see these pelicans in one of the columns. And the pelican is an ancient symbol of Christianity, standing for the mother bird that feeds the baby birds from its beak. And just like it appears as if the babies are eating the mother itself, standing, of course, for the body of Christ. After the Lord's Supper and also the washing of the feet that took place over there again, it takes us back to the Holy Week. So it's not really a part of our story, but it's important to mention. 40 days later, after Jesus' resurrection, it will ascend from the Mount of Olives. And what you're looking at right now is the entrance to the Church of Ascension, the traditional place where the Ascension took place. It's a very ancient tradition. It goes back to early Christianity. And today, that's the dome above the place where Jesus ascended to heaven. So that's how it looks like from inside. And at some point in history, about 800 years ago, it turned into a mosque, okay, over here, but this is standing for the mosque, what you see here, facing Mecca, this little niche in the wall. But just next to it, there is the traditional place where Jesus departed and ascended to heaven. Again, it's from the book of Acts, and there is a print of his foot over here on the rock, according to the tradition. So let's read this a little bit. After his suffering, he presented himself to them and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive. He appeared to them over a period of 40 days and spoke about the kingdom of God. On one occasion, while he was eating with them, he gave them this command: do not leave Jerusalem, but wait for the gift my Father promised, which you have heard me speak about. For John baptized with water, but in a few days you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit. Okay, so Jesus is specifically asking them, don't go away, okay? Stay in Jerusalem, despite of the hardship, just stay. 10 days later, again, we're in the time frame between Easter and next Sunday it's going to be Pentecost. So 40 days before 40 days after Easter, after his resurrection, Jesus leaves them. And there is something about that moment that he leaves them, that some questions are asked and some things are said. And I want to read this with you and connect it to what you see over here. Then they gathered around him and asked him, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel? Are we going to have independence? Are we going to have sovereignty over Jerusalem from the Romans, independent from the Romans? Okay, that's what this is the mindset in Jewish tradition. If there is a redemption, if there is a Messiah, it's a king. There is a king to Israel. So where is that king? Okay, that's what they're asking. Today in Israel, this is the Knesset. This is the Knesset, the House of Representatives, the Israeli parliament. And if you look carefully at the seats, you'll see it's shaped like a menorah. The 7 branches menorah. I mentioned earlier the number 7, the significance of number 7, and as you can see, the menorah has an important role in that, and our Knesset is designed just like that. So that's again a very common way of thinking in Judaism. If there is a Messiah, if you are the Messiah, deliver us from the Romans, get us independence. In those days, Peter stood up among the believers. A group, and then it says a group numbering about 120. Okay, so in the book of Acts, before we're going back to the room of the Last Supper. How many are with them? 120, or let's be more accurate, about 120. So we have 120 people on our parliament. It derives from the ancient Knesset, that's how it's called, the ancient Knesset of the returnees of Babylon. When they returned from Babylon, they had, let's say, not exactly a House of Representatives, but the leadership, the body of leadership of the Jews that returned from Babylon, from the first exile, had 120 members. And what's this number, 120? It's 70 plus 50. 70, needless to say, again, that number 7, and 50, again, 7 times 7 plus that 1, okay? And when it says about, it's just beautiful to see that. It says about 120. It doesn't say 120, about 120. There is something about the added 1 that is something else. That is something else. And in the Bible, they're usually, definitely in the Old Testament, they're always very accurate with numbers. And think about the book of Numbers when they count all the people. Give you a very detailed description of how many people are in each tribe and all that. And over here, in such a dramatic moment in the history of the early church, we have this word about 120. So interesting to see that. Okay. We're entering now to the room of the Last Supper. Just before we do that, let me just correct something in my presentation. It will be a little easier for me. Then I can see you. Okay, like that, it's a little better. Okay, great. We are in the room of the Last Supper. You can see about 120. No, I'm kidding. But you can see the amount of people that are gathering, not necessarily for Pentecost. This is how, before COVID, that's how the room of the Last Supper usually looked like. So many groups, so many people coming, praying, such an important place. And you can see this Ethiopian group, for example, and we'll connect that, of course, to the story itself, the text itself. Okay, so let's take a look. I'm reading from the book of Acts, the 2nd chapter. When the day of Pentecost, the 50th day, came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like a blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit enabled them. Just like Mount Sinai, just like Mount Sinai, wind, fire, torches, okay? After 50 days since the Exodus, on the bottom of Mount Sinai, this is the experience of the tribes of Israel. And New Israel, the establishment of the church, okay? Same experience, as you can see over here. Let's continue a little more. People are starting to be amazed. Aren't these people are Galileans? Okay, they start to speak in tongues. Then how is it that each of us hears them in our own native language? Parthians, Medes, these are from Iran. Elamites, all these are from Iran. Residents of Mesopotamia, Iraq of our days. Judea and Cappadocia, that's Turkey. Pontus and Asia. Phrygia, and it goes on and on, as you can see. Both Jews and converts to Judaism. Cretans and Arabs. We hear them declaring the wonders of God in our own tongues. Amazed and perplexed, they ask one another, what does this mean? Some, however, made fun of them and said they have had too much wine. Okay, so we'll get to that in a moment. But as you can see, the Torah that was given to the children of Israel in Hebrew now is given to all of mankind in all languages. This is the main dramatic moment of the establishment of the early church. Another thing that we can see here in the book of Acts, some, however, made fun of them. Oh, they're drunk. It takes us back to the days of Hannah. Hannah in the Mishkan in Shiloh, that also was considered to be drunk. So people think, oh, these guys are drunk. It's not really the Holy Spirit. So there is something about that moment that a community become an establishment. that someone is thinking that, oh, they're drunk. Eli considered Hannah to be a drunk woman, but she was just pouring her heart, just like the people of the early church were pouring their heart after the experience of the Holy Spirit. So the people that were used to the temple, the more, let's say, organized, or more well-established religion, are now making fun of them. And this is the moment that the transition is now going to the new found church. About the history of the room itself, fascinating little place. It used to be, as I said, a little attic of some Jewish person, and then it was in the 4th century. The Byzantine built a church over there, a massive church called Hagia Sion, dedicated to Mary. It was a huge church, and we learned that from not a lot from the archaeological remains, but from the accounts of people voyagers and pilgrims that came to Jerusalem. So there was a big church over there, destroyed by the Persians, rebuilt by the Crusaders. That's the little room that we have today. Not very little, but nice size, a nice size room with all the arches. I can show you some of these arches right here. And about 500 years ago, the Ottomans took over it and turned it into a mosque. That explains the Arabic inscriptions that you can see on the windows. And since 1948, it was open again for whoever wanted to visit it in Mount Zion under the hands of Israel until today. Until today, it's run by the Israeli government. It's open, of course, for everyone. People can worship there, but there's a status quo agreement, and only specific churches can celebrate Pentecost and have a mass over there officially. That's how it goes today. Okay. From this dramatic moment of the church, I want to walk you down to the tomb of King David. Let me just share my screen now, just to show you how it looks like when we walk now, to, okay, this is again the room, just the last little look. And we're going out.
You'll never see it empty like that.
Yeah, I took that video maybe 6 months ago. Couldn't believe it myself. So there are, again, it's called the upper room. Now we're walking downstairs. There's a little plaza and some yeshivas for Jewish studies. And we're taking a right turn to, I hope it's not too choppy, but again, I'm going to move now to, again, back to the pictures. It's okay, Lisa? Yeah, we're entering now to the tomb of King David. So that's how the entrance looks like.
It's choppy.
It's a little choppy. Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, just go in.
Yeah, I didn't want to optimize it, but I see that it did affect it. Anyway, we're entering now to the room of the Last Supper. There's a little synagogue there today. For years, Jews, Christians, Muslims, everyone were praying over there with the soul of the prophet David, or King David as we call it. Over there, you'll see again that synagogue for dancing and celebrating. Over there, sometimes you'll see soldiers visiting it and celebrating next to the tomb itself, the sarcophagus that you see over here. And usually what they will sing is David Melech Israel, David, King of Israel, Chai v'Kayam, live and existing. Okay, he's alive. Okay, it very much resonates the idea of the living God or a living Messiah, Jesus as the Messiah, King David as a Messiah. They are alive. They are here. They're with us. They guide us. Okay. And over there at the room of the Last Supper, Peter says the following: fellow Israelites, I can tell you confidently that the patriarch David died and was buried, and his tomb is here to this day. He's saying that in the room of the Last Supper, and that one of the reasons why we think the tomb of King David is over there. When you go back to the book of Samuel, it says that when King David died, he was buried in the city of David, which is not there. It's not over there. So 3,000 years ago, David was buried probably in the city of David. Okay, so why are we praying over here? It's because of these ancient traditions. People were praying there long enough to establish this tradition. It has a lot to do also with Christianity and the idea that the tomb of King David is associated with the room of the Last Supper. I must say that when I read the different traditions, including Josephus, it seems like all the Jews, even let's say a century or two before, let's say the Roman Empire converted to Christianity, even the Jews connected Mount Zion to King David. So 2,000 years ago, people's opinion was around this mountain, that this is where the tomb of King David is. So what is that little place that we see over here? This is probably an ancient Byzantine apse, part of this ancient church. And the sarcophagus that you see over here is probably from the days of the Crusaders. So again, people don't think that David is inside or anything, but this is the place to pray with the soul of King David. And this is the major point. Few last thing about Mount Zion, then we're moving on to the Old City. As I said, Mount Zion was a military base between 48 and 67. People were allowed to, not like massive groups, okay, but people were allowed to visit it, but it was challenging. It was challenging because the Jordanian snipers and soldiers were on the walls of the Old City, just over here. Okay, I'll erase that. This is where the walls of the Old City. And Mount Zion was just a little hill that held by Israel. And as you can see, the valley is very deep in between. So the main ways of communication for the soldiers to go back and forth and to supply the mountain was this little cart, cable cart that you see over here for, let's say, 300 kilograms of supply could be supplied from the western city to the mountain itself. And it's still there. It's still there, this cable car. So this is one thing. And another way of communicating was this tunnel that is now open for the public. I don't have like pictures from, they just opened it like 2 weeks ago. But over here, you can actually walk there. Today, you can actually, it's open, they cleared it. Now you can actually walk in that old bunker from the 50s. So that, again, some remains of that. Few last things before we continue to the Jewish quarter. We have a few, on Mount Zion, there are a few important cemeteries, the Armenian one, a Greek Orthodox one, two Protestant ones, and this is one of these Protestant cemeteries, these Protestant cemeteries. That's how it looks like. So I took this picture, probably it was springtime, I guess, judging from all the vegetation that you can see. For the Protestant community, most of them are Germans, British, and Americans, including this man, Oskar Schindler. Oskar Schindler, the righteous among nations that saved the lives of 1,200 Jews during the Holocaust. He, in a way, he would say, I have the covenant. I have these 10 commandments. And it's just not right. So he embraced fully the Constitution, the 10 commandments that were given on Mount Sinai and given again in the days of the Pentecost. So this is the righteous Oskar Schindler that is buried over there. And as you can see, that he has a lot of little rocks over here on his tomb. It's a Jewish tradition to leave a rock on a tomb. There are all kinds of reasons why, but when you visit a tomb, you want to connect to that person, you leave a little stone on it, not flowers, actually. In the Jewish tradition, we're not supposed to leave flowers. And as you can see, lots of Jews are visiting him, and this is what you see over here, this special man. Let's move now to the to the old city, within the walls. And before I show you Mount Zion, I want to start with this mezuzah. Mezuzah, as you know, in the doors of the children of Israel was supposed to have a little scroll from the Bible with the verses of, for example, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, and a few other verses. And it's a special mezuzah. It's a special mezuzah that you don't see anywhere else but on Zion Gate, which is on Mount Zion. And it's made out of shell. Because of all the wars and battles that took place on Mount Zion, we have this special mezuzah. I want to take you now with the help of Google Earth. Yeah, over here. I'm going up to the roof. And over here, on the roof of Mount Zion, this was the closest place for Jews to pray facing Mount Moriah. Okay, you can see the golden dome over here, the Dome of the Rock, just over here. This was, again, the closest place for us to pray back in the 50s and the 60s. With that, let's get to Zion Gate. Here is Zion Gate. As you can see over here, we saw the Dormition Abbey just around the corner, and now we're entering the old city. And again, you can see the bullet holes and shrapnels from all the battles that took place. At least I see some action on the chat, and if you find one of the questions relevant for now, I'll be happy to answer, of course. So over here, but we'll have time for that, don't worry, guys. So over here, you can see again the bullet holes and shrapnels from all the war that took place. And the border, or the armistice line between Israel and Jordan, was right here, right over here. Jordan on this side, on the walls, and Israeli soldiers on the other side, on Mount Zion. Let's continue. We're flying just a little bit above the Jewish border, and with the help of these architects company, it's called Simplex, I took these two interesting shots of what we've done so far, what we are going to do. We walked the Dormition Abbey, we visited the Room of the Last Supper and the Tomb of King David. We went down across the road to Oscar Schindler's tomb, just over here. And now we're back to Mount Zion. We're going to enter the old city. Okay, you can see the Dome of the Rock over here. Okay, just want to keep you oriented. Let's look at the next one. Zion Gate is just over here. This part is the Armenian Quarter. All these houses around this one and this one, St. James Church. And we're going to walk virtually right now towards the Horva Synagogue. Horva Synagogue is the central synagogue of the Jewish Quarter, just over here. And again, you can see the Temple Mount right over here. Okay, so just to keep you nicely oriented.
Tamar,
Yeah.
can you just check the chat for 1 second, please?
No, okay, yeah. No problem. So this is the heart of the Jewish Quarter. You can see the menorah. You can see the Horva Synagogue just over here. And these are the new modern houses of the Jewish Quarter. Just next to the Horva, like the Horva Synagogue can actually go up to the top of it, to the roof of it, and overlook the other parts of the city. For example, Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Christian Quarter, the Muslim Quarter, where you see the minaret, and the Temple Mount itself. Just next to the Horva Synagogue, I think there is one of the beautiful little archaeological pieces that we have. These cobblestones that you see in front of you guys over here were found 3 meters underneath, about 9 feet underneath, and elevated to the street level. And these are cobblestones from the old Jewish neighborhood of priests that lived over here on Mount Zion, the slopes of Mount Zion, where the Jewish Quarter is now. Now, This is very ancient. This is Roman time. This is 2,000 years old, these stones. And because we have found houses of priests, under these houses, under exactly these houses, we found houses of priests, of Kohens. Who knows? Maybe when Jesus was arrested, maybe he walked in this neighborhood to Caiaphas' house. Maybe. So let's go and check these different underground museums that we have over there. The houses of priests that were found with beautiful mosaics, like you can see here, with this bathtub that you can see over here, and ritual bath and mikveh right over here. Okay, you can see the actual stairs to this ritual bath. And as we continue in the Herodian quarter, that's how it's called, we'll see more of these ritual baths and more of these mosaics and beautiful other findings of this little neighborhood of priests. How do we know the priests lived over there? Because we found inscriptions of them. We found inscriptions of names of families of priests and one depiction of ancient menorah, just carved, chiseled on the wall. Shavuot and the temple, Shavuot and Pentecost. Right now we're standing in front of the of Beit HaMikdash, of the temple, and inside over here there was something going on the top of Mount Moriah. What was inside the Holy of Holies over here? Let's connect the next one back to the presentation. So this is how the Golden Dome, the Dome of the Rock, looks like from inside. And over here, this is the top of Mount Moriah. Just remember that. Going now to back to the presentation. Sorry. Here we are. Oops. Yeah, that's it. So here is the western wall and the Dome of the Rock. And inside of the Dome of the Rock used to be the Ark of the Covenant with the Ten Commandments, And let's go back to the Ten Commandments we talked a little bit in the beginning. It has 10 commandments, as we know, and they are divided to 5 and 5 commandments. The first 5 commandments often referred to as commandments for Israel. And the other 5 commandments this is for the entire world. But this, of course, is not true. All of that is for all of mankind. Okay, this is for all of mankind. Monotheism. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other God before me. You shall not make yourself in the image in the form of anything. Not to worship other gods again. Because if you worship other gods, maybe you worship other set of values, and that's not monotheism. There's only one moral code that God is giving to us. And then remember the Sabbath day, a day that is dedicated to God, the seventh day. You need a day to both mentally to have a day off, but also a day that you can focus on the words of God. Honor your father and mother. It's pretty obvious. And then you have all the others. I don't want to focus on all of them. What I am interested is the continuation of Exodus 20. So the 10 commandments are mentioned in the book of Exodus and later in the book of Deuteronomy. But I want to read from the book of Exodus 20. What is the continuation of that? Make an altar of earth. Okay, just in the same chapter, a little bit after the 10 commandments, it says this: make an altar of earth for me and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings. Whenever I cause my name to be honored, okay, is anchored in a certain geography. We learn that these values are not just international values that are implemented are given to everyone, and that's it. It's also connected to a certain time and to a certain geography. A certain time, Pentecost, Mount Sinai. A certain geography, let's see, altar of earth in the place where I caused my name to be honored. You will define, and then it says, okay, do not have stairs. Okay, do not, it says, if you make an altar of stones for me, do not build it with dressed stones, okay, not to carve it with metal, for you will defile it if you use tool on it. And also, do not go up to my altar on steps, because on steps, your private parts may be exposed, okay? So we learn the morality of that, and when we look at the altar that used to be in the temple has a flat ramp, no stairs, no stairs. So what we're looking at right now are the two altars in Jerusalem, the altar on Mount Moriah and the altar, the Golgotha, okay? So this is the place that is anchoring the Ten Commandments. Jerusalem is the geography that gives us this code, this moral code that we all share. So until this very day, Jews considered not just the kingdom of heaven, but also kingdom of earth. Will you restore our independence? Okay, just like the disciples asked. We want to connect that. We want to connect the moral code to a certain geography, and you, of course, with us. So this is from the Independence Day a few years back. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to respond.
Thank you, Itamar. Thank you very much. I think Joseph is he back? Joseph?
Yep.
Hi, Joseph.
Hi. So thank you to Itamar and to our partners at Travelujah for that educational, informative, and inspirational tour. I hope that you all enjoyed it. We're gonna have a time now for questions and answers to ask Elise and Itamar about this tour, about Israel, or I can answer as well. But before we do that, I just want to reiterate that that it's been a very difficult time for the tourism industry and for Travelujah Tours as one of the tour companies in the tourism industry where they have not been able to receive any physical tourists. So best is to come to Israel and see the sites yourself, the biblical sites, and the modern sites. And second best is to see it in a virtual tour like we just had. In a physical tour, when you come, usually when you get off the bus, there's an opportunity to give a tip, a financial gift to the tour guide. And this is, in many ways, is a major part of their income, is the tips. So we want to replicate that virtually and give you an opportunity as a way to bless Israel and bless Travelujah and Itamar and Elisa by those who have the means to bless them through PayPal. So I'm going to share in the chat the link. I'm also going to share my screen. You can see this slide here. I'll just keep it on there. So, you know, if you found this educational and informative and would like to express your appreciation to Travelujah Tours, please go to their PayPal and give generously. We thank you. Also, as a reminder, All Israel News is a nonprofit as well, and we're dependent on reader donations. So you're more than welcome also, as you get the emails and the updates from All Israel News, to go there. And and it's allisrael.com/donate. And I'll also put that in the chat. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to go back to questions and answers. And I see that there's one in the chat now.
Yep. So does the ancient wall around the entire city remain today? Was part of the temple actually a wall? Maybe you can explain what was really the walls and how they've evolved through the years. That would probably be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll just share my screen here again with Google Earth. Jerusalem today is the biggest city in Israel, the capital, and also the biggest city in Israel, about 1 million people. And the walls have evolved and were different, look differently in Bronze Age, in Iron Age, and later on in Roman times. So let me just draw this real quick. These are the walls today, the Ottoman wall, like that. You can see it in red. Ottoman walls, 500 years old. The ancient walls, let's do that, draw that in blue. The Bronze Age walls, I'm talking about David and before him, the Jebusites, okay? They actually lived over here in the city of David, okay? That's what you see approximately like that, okay? So this is ancient Jerusalem from the days of King David. Then came a king called Hezekiah, that built a second wall that goes up from the Siloam pool to Mount Zion, goes like that with the topography, and then turns right. There's a valley over there that you don't see right now, and surrounded some parts of the Temple Mount, just like that. The yellow one is the wall of King Hezekiah, and in the days of Jesus, it looked differently. There was another little wall, something like that, with the pools of Bethesda over here, where the dot is. But the important part is that the church of the Holy Sepulchre, the tomb of Jesus, was outside the walls. In his days, in the days of Jesus, this area in red was in the outskirts. It was not a part of the city. So the city that Jesus saw is the combination of green, yellow, blue. That's what he saw, but not the red one, not the red part. Right? I hope it makes sense. In the end of the Roman period, the walls was even extended like that, but this was not in Jesus' time.
Okay.
I hope you
Okay.
like this little drawing.
And Rashonda has a question. Could you please review or clarify, is there an altar on Mount Moriah and at Golgotha? And are these one and the same? Can you kind of differentiate between the two?
Of course. So I'm taking you now to the Temple Mount, to the location of the first temple, and the second temple, and also with them, the first altar and the second altar that used to be right over here. So there is the Dome of the Rock, and right over here there used to be not the best painter, as you can see, but this was the altar. You can imagine the burnt offerings like that. And again, it has the ramp. This is the location of the original altar. When Jesus crucified and raised from the dead, the belief of early Christianity was that the sanctity of Mount Moriah, as they knew it for all these years, had gone and moved to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Golgotha. And the Golgotha represents the ultimate altar, where the ultimate sacrifice, that Jesus, the Lamb of God, the ultimate lamb, you can say, replaces the altar on Mount Moriah. So in a way, you can say that the Golgotha is the second Mount Moriah. The Golgotha and the Holy of Holies, which is the tomb of Jesus, they replaced this Mount Moriah. You can call it the second Mount Moriah or the alternative Mount Moriah or Mount Moriah. So it's used this, it stands with the same idea, the same concept of an altar and sacrifice, but another location, a different location.
Okay, thank you. Is Hamas, this question from Miranda, is Hamas interested in isolating or controlling the Dome of the Rock? And why does Turkey, in your opinion, want to separate Jerusalem from Israel?
It's just Turkey and Hamas are basically a part of a political stream that started in the 1920s called the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood, and it has an Islamic, radical Islamic political opinions, which is that Jerusalem is Muslim and should be under Muslim rule. So whether you say Hamas or Turkey, it's the same ideology basically in it. So yes, they want to see Jerusalem under Muslim rule again. I hope I answered the question. I mean, if there is a follow-up, then no problem.
I'm sure there may be some more questions, so please feel free to either open up your mic or put it into the chat. We have some time here for questions. Even if it's not directly related to Pentecost or Shavuot, which we just celebrated last weekend. But we'd love to hear your questions and help you understand Israel to, a much greater extent. That's our passion. Israel.
Our honor also, of course.
Yeah.
We'd love to talk about it. So please.
Yeah. Also, Michael asked, can we watch this again? And yes, all those who signed up, I will send a private YouTube link so you can watch it and go through all the details that Itamar was showing you.
Yeah.
So yes. Some of you, if you don't get it, please write me at admin@allisrael.com. Possibly some of you, did a typo when you entered your email address, and that's the reason maybe you didn't get an email. So yeah.
Michael, I see, asks about Sheikh Jarrah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Sheikh Jarrah in Hebrew, we call it Simon the Righteous neighborhood. Simon the Righteous was one of the high priests in the days of the temple, the days of the second temple. And it's believed that he's buried over there. There's an actual ancient burial site from the days of the second temple over there. And this is the tradition. In the I can't remember if it's the 1870s or the 1890s. I think it's the 1870s. This land was purchased by a Jewish person, and they wanted to start a neighborhood over there. They built that little neighborhood. Jews lived there until 1948, and in 1948, just like because of the war, the Independence War, the Western city was cleared from its Arab inhabitants, and the Eastern city, Old City included, Jewish Quarter included, was emptied from its Jewish population, including Sheikh Jarrah, which is on the eastern side. I can, I'll just show it to you in just a second. And so again, between 48 and 67, Jews didn't live over there. So who did live? Refugees, Palestinian refugees from West Jerusalem lived over there. So over here you can see Damascus Gate. This is the northern gate, and Sheikh Jarrah is approximately somewhere here. Here, Shimon Tzaddik, Simon the Righteous. So this is Sheikh Jarrah, this area over here. And so again, just so you'll be oriented with the Old City wall, here you can see these are the northern walls just over here, and we're talking about this area. You can see the green line also. The green line is just over here. So as I said, 48 to 67, these Arab families live over there. And since 1967, Israel basically, not right away, but Israeli organizations started to reclaim these houses. So there is no, let's say, legal point of view, there is no dispute that these houses belongs to Jews and their inheritance, the people that inherited it. It's just that the Arab families started to pay rent. Originally, they paid rent to the Jordanian authorities. Then they were supposed to pay rent to these Israeli organizations that own the property. And they didn't pay rent for many years, as far as I understood. And it got to the
20 years.
20 years. Yeah, there you go. 20 years. And as far as I know, there was no final decision yet, right? At least they postponed it, I think.
No final decision. The court ruled, obviously that they would have to be evicted, but then it didn't, it still is not final at this point in time. So I don't know if maybe they're coming up with a more creative solution, leasing or what have you, but it's still, it's still clear as mud.
Yeah. So this is, again, it's a property issue, but it raises, of course, a lot of emotions because it's in Jerusalem, because they are refugees in the sense of refugees that will leave their house again for the second time. So this is again why there is so much tension around that.
A question here about, would you understand languages spoken on Pentecost then to be different languages than those that are spoken now? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Rashonda, are you referring to like tongues? Is that?
Yeah. Yes. Correct.
Look, the Hebrew is Hebrew. We know how the Hebrew sounded back then, because in the Talmud they preserve that Hebrew, that Second Temple Hebrew we call it, which very close to the Hebrew we speak today. And then the Aramaic, they spoke Aramaic too. I read Aramaic. I don't really speak it, but I read Aramaic. I understand Aramaic when I read it, because it's a part of our tradition to read the Torah portions that we read every Saturday in Hebrew and then in Aramaic. So I kind of got used to the Aramaic too. Arabic, I speak Arabic. Whether I don't believe it was exactly the same Arabic, and as far as the Persian languages or the Asia Minor languages that are mentioned over there, I believe it went very far apart. You know, Hebrew is a frozen language, so it's pretty much the same, but definitely not the Persian languages that have developed a lot since then. And there's vast difference between the Persian that was spoken back then and the Persian that is spoken today. Yeah, so that's all what I know.
Julie Billow has a question
Yeah.
Referring to the variety of dates that are associated with Pentecost and,
Yeah.
and the Israelites, and I think you could also talk about Shavuot, maybe make that parallel.
Yeah.
The Western and Eastern Church, which always has different dates. It's not just Pentecost, but it's also Easter as well.
Yeah. The whole calendar is different. It's Julian calendar versus Gregorian calendars. It's 11 days apart. And then we have the Hebrew calendar, which has its own rule.
Sure.
And it's we celebrate it in the 6th of the month of Sivan. That's how it's called, the month of Sivan. We follow our own Hebrew calendar. I hope it's not too confusing, but yeah.
Maybe you could explain a little bit, take it another step and explain the difference between more the Western and Eastern Church and why those calendars are so different.
It's just, I can't remember I think it was in the 12th century, if I remember correctly. I probably don't get me, I'm not 100% sure that what I described is accurate, but I think it was the 12th century that the Roman Caesars, of the Western Roman Empire, they have changed the calendar, and the Byzantine Empire kept the Julian calendar. So this was the difference. So it's just that I would almost dare to say it's a little bit political decision as well, and because and since then I think every 20 or 30 years they add another day of difference between them. So there is something going on with that. Not 20, 30 years, a few hundreds of years. There is an added day to it because it's not synchronized.
Right, and the different churches follow different calendars.
Sorry, my explanation is not 100%, but if you want to check deeper, it's called the Julian calendar versus the Gregorian calendar.
And it's the same reason why there's 3 Christmases too, and because of the different calendars. So yeah, it's confusing, and it's something that we see every single year. That Christmas and Easter always falls on there's celebrated on different days depending on whether it's an Eastern religion, Eastern Christianity, or Western Christianity. Any other questions? Do we have any questions regarding the situation now, or anything you want to ask? Don't be afraid. This is your moment. We're here to certainly give you some more insight into what is happening. MB, I have some questions from all the Israeli inhabitants. How many are Jews and how many are Arabs? And within the Jewish community, how many are traditional Orthodox, secular, atheist, and Messianic Christians? And any reason why most of Jews are still waiting for the Messiah to come and do not accept or recognize Jesus?
Okay, question number 1 about the inhabitants of Israel. 75% are Jewish, not just according to the definition of the state of Israel, but also according to the rabbinic law. 75%. There is a 5% more or less of people of Jewish heritage that are not necessarily Jewish according to the rabbinic law, but they are of Jewish heritage, meaning one of their, not their mother, but their father maybe is Jewish, or one of their grandparents is Jewish, but they're not Jewish according to the Jewish law. They usually also referred as the Jews of Israel. Okay, so we're talking about 75 or 80% of the population. 20% are Arab-speaking minorities, mainly Arab-speaking minorities. Most of them are Muslim, about 15%, maybe a little more. No, 15%. And the other 5% are Druze and Arab Christians from different denominations. We're talking about 150,000 Druze or 140,000 Druze, and more or less the same number of Arab Christians, a little more, 170,000 Arab Christians.
Mhm.
And then we have within the second question was about the traditional. Okay, so there is a spectrum in Israel between not really atheists. We have very few atheists, but I would say secular Jews, all the way to the ultra-Orthodox.
Mhm.
Well, the ultra-Orthodox are about 10% of the population, and 900,000 people, more or less. And there is, among the Jewish community, there is a variety of, I would call it Jewish behaviors. So there are the more traditional Jews that keep more of the Jewish law. There are those who maybe go on the holidays. There are those who don't do anything, but they will do the bris, the circumcision, and they will do bar mitzvah. There's a variety of, a whole range of Jewish behaviors. I think this would be the best way to describe it. But it does connect to something I pointed out. For many Jews that live in Israel, just living in Israel, speaking Hebrew, and sometimes even serving in the army, that's their way to connect to their Jewish identity and Israeli identity. It doesn't have to be the practice of the religion itself, but the nationalism, because Judaism is a strange animal a little bit. It's a combination of national identity and religious identity. It's very much intertwined. Again, it goes back to what the disciples asked Jesus: we'll get independence back from the Romans. This is what they had in mind. So this is, again, in modern Israel, and one of the main things to identify with the Jewish community is simply serving in the army, which doesn't seems like a religious obligation, right? But for some people it does. Okay, about Messianic Christians, maybe I think it's 6,000. I'm not sure. Joseph, maybe you can help us out. I'm not 100%
I'm
sure.
not really sure how large that community, the
Yeah.
community of Messianic Christians is.
Yeah, it's
I know
estimated,
that they're scattered across the country.
it's estimated between 20 to 30,000, which
Okay.
in some hands might be high, and the percentage is very low. It's approximately 2 to 0.3% of the country. And in terms of the Arab Christians, not from the traditional, we'll say the Greek Orthodox churches or the traditional Christian churches, we'll call them evangelical Christians who are Arabs. That numbers, I've heard estimates around 5,000.
Nice. Okay, thank you very much for that. Yeah, I wasn't sure about the third question. Any reason why the most of Jews still wait for the Messiah to come and do not accept? Okay, it's simply the different concept of Messiah in Judaism. So I would divide it into two answers, actually. We do believe in a Messiah from the house of David. We do believe that there will come a day that the Messiah from the house of David will come to Israel and rule here. He's flesh and blood, he's a politician, could be an army man, but he is from the house of David, an actual person, not an angel or anything like that. It is one perception of it. And others would refer to the Messiah not necessarily as a specific person, but they will say, and this is very common, this is a very common belief, that simply the redemption of Israel represents the messianic era. And although there is no one person that we can point out and say this is the Messiah, we can say he's moving that process. So he's very deeply involved in the messianic process. So for example, rabbis and others pointed out Herzl as a Messiah, Ben Gurion as a Messiah, other leaders as Messiah. Not again, part of the let's call it the collective manifestation of a Messiah. It doesn't have to be one person. It could be a group of people, of leaders that moves Israel forward into sovereignty.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know who MB is, but MB is welcome.
I can tell you I'm from a great mission from Vienna, and I'm very, very interested in Israel and all of the news and all of the stuff there. And then I'm just curious because I'm in Torah, and all of the Old Testament, all of the books from there are speaking about Jesus, and it's proven that Jesus was Messiah. But the most of Hebrew do not accept that. So for me as a Christian, it's very easy to understand. We accept, it's everything fine. And then for the holy people of the God, because you are chosen, or I mean, you were chosen to be the holy people and holy nation, they do not understand. And then the others understand easier. So it's very strange for me not to understand.
Sure.
And then we see also the fulfillment of the prophecies from the Bible. We see them now, even including with what is happening now with Gaza and all of the wars. We believe in them, but Jewish people, they don't believe in them. So it's for your good to believe in them, but the Israel nation does not believe. And then the Christians over the world, they pray for Israel, and then we are really with you, and we really want the best for you. But the nation Israel, they don't believe in all of the promises of God. So Shema Israel does not really exist for the Hebrew now. Huh? They don't believe in that God.
Yeah, I'll tell you something about it's just my opinion over here. I think that Israelis are a nation of 12 tribes. Now we call everyone Jews now, okay? But these 12 tribes, these ancient 12 tribes, represents different ways of understanding its surrounding, and different ways of understanding God and politics, etc., etc. And we acknowledge the difference between us, and we actually bless it, because there is a reason why it's like that. There is a reason why there is such a huge difference in the opinions of different Israelis about everything. But having said that, we also believe that we are coming from one spirit. The soul of Israel is one. It's one soul that actually is divided to many people, and therefore they are all attached to that soul. So it's just like one person with lots of thoughts. That's how we refer to it. Yes, Elisa, if you want to add on it.
No, I would just say that, correct me if I'm wrong, Jesus also came from the house of David. So that's the real parallel there, is that Jesus and King David are both seen as a Messiah. In our religion, we believe Jews that are not Messianic obviously believe that the Messiah is yet to come, whereas those who are Messianic believe that the Messiah has already come in the form of Jesus. And it's really our interpretation and our vision of what is exactly, a Messiah. We certainly do believe that, this is the fulfillment of a dream of well over 2,000 years, the nation of Israel. And I have to tell you that we are so happy that Austria and the Chancellor in Austria came out so strongly in support of what is happening here now and our right to defend ourselves. And we can't tell you how much we appreciate that. So I wanted to let you know that, MB, that we're very, very encouraged by the support that we're getting from many nations around the world, including Austria. Michael has a question here that much of
I see the introduction, the indoctrination, sorry. There is a man called Marcus Sheff. He was the advisor of the UN about the curriculum, especially in conflicted areas. And you should read some of his reports. It's just horrific the way I see it, to teach kids such twisted opinions and thoughts, sadly, in the Palestinian territories. And some of this curriculum is sadly funded by the UN. We talk about UNRWA, for example, not to mention what's going on in Gaza. This is a whole different story and a whole different curriculum. It could be even worse. But what can I say? I mean, when I say they, I mean our Palestinian neighbors, which I cherish many of them. Okay, I can't stress that strong enough. I really, some of them are very good friend of mine. Their collective, I would say, behavior leads them to nowhere, and especially when it comes to taking care of their own children, education, infrastructure, all of that. Where is it? For me to see that, it's painful to see what's going on with these children. Yeah, so I can only hope and pray for them too, that they will take care of the future of themselves and of the future and of their children. Of course, this is especially painful to see that with the children. I agree.
Joseph?
No. Okay, so thank you for everyone for joining for this tour. Really want to thank Itamar and Elisa for an excellent presentation. And yeah, I learned, and I'm sure that other people learned as well. And I thank you all who are listening and watching and signed up. Thank you again for joining. We'll have more tours in the coming months, and we'll be sending you our next tour. We don't have the date set yet or the topic, but we'll be sending that to you. And as a reminder, as a gesture of a token of appreciation, you can give a tip to Itamar and Elisa, and as a way of blessing Israel and standing with Israel during these difficult financial times. So yeah, so paypal.me/Travelujah. I'll put it in the chat again, and I'll share my screen. Actually, so okay, so signing off for everyone. Thank you for joining, and
Joseph,
yes,
thank you, Tamar. Stay safe, stay healthy, and hope to see you all soon.
great, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Shalom.
Shalom. Shalom. Shalom.